Welcome to our session called Don't Blow Your Lid, Learn JARS, the gold standard of abstracts, introductions, and method sections. Generally speaking, this is a presentation about the APA Journal Article Reporting Standards, known as JARS. I am the Dozier Education Librarian and Assistant Professor here at the University of San Diego. And today's goals, we're going to explore what the JARS standards are. And much of this content is addressed in Chapter 3 of the APA 7 publication manual and also on APA style. So it's apastyle.apa.org/JARS. I will place that in the chat for you. We're going to cover an overview of JARS. We are also going to talk about the ethics of transparency and why JARS are important. We're going to talk about the abstract and introduction standards that are addressed in Chapter 3 of the publication manual. And then we're also going to address 3 types of JARS standards, those for quant, those for qual, and those for mixed methods. So there's an infographic here I'd like you to look at that gives a visual overview of what JARS is and why it's useful. So essentially, JARS provides guidelines for the effective communication of behavioral science research. And there are 3 kinds of research that are addressed within JARS. First, there's quant research or JARS quant, which is indicated by this red circle on the Venn diagram. Then we have qualitative research or JARS qual, which is addressed by the blue. And then within the middle, we have mixed methods research, which is a combination of quant plus qual research. And that's what we call JARS mixed. The point of the standards allows us to have clear guidelines that establishes a baseline and an expectation of what we should see when we look at quant, qual, or mixed methods research when it is formatted in APA style. So the benefits: research transparency, everyone's following the same standards, then the research should be transparent. It will have the same basic essential components, and it allows you to establish a rigor for the methodologies. It's supposed to increase opportunities for collaboration and funding. If people are following the same standards, it's easier to collaborate across different fields or disciplines that are following the APA style. And it helps reduce barriers of language and institutional differences when we're following the same standards. One of the other things is that it makes it much easier to conduct replication studies, because if the research is formatted according to the standards, it makes it much easier for people to be able to follow the process of your study and thus replicate your study and build upon the scholarly community. So what's in it for us as scholarly participants and practitioners in this work? We are often reviewers. So it establishes guidelines of what reviewers should be looking for when they are evaluating manuscripts in different publications and presentations. As authors, it allows us to have standardized tracking, evaluation, and replication of the research models. The students learn better how to report their research and conduct their research. Okay, so you know what you're looking for, you know what you need to report, you know what you need to write. Educators learn the standards. They learn how to teach their students to be better researchers and reporters of said research. And editors help improve the quality of published research. So with the standards comes standardization. Everyone is, within the same community, and they understand the research transparency and the rigor of the methodology that is expected. And of course, there are multiple resources that will be available on the APA website to help you understand that. And again, a lot of this content is coming from Chapter 3 of the publication manual for APA 7. An overview of the reporting standards and transparency. I want to discuss the transparency first because I definitely believe in transparency of research, transparency of how we are obtaining our research and where this is all coming from so we know where we're going and where we are. The JARS started with JARS Quant, which was first published in 2008 and was updated in 2018 to increase the transparency of how these reporting standards were being established and communicated. JARS Qual was first published in 2018 and has an emphasis on reflexive descriptions. JARS Mixed, also first published in 2018, with an emphasis on how Qual plus Quant can provide deeper understanding of research. There was a time in which you had to pick a side. You had to pick either that you were going to do quantitative research or you were going to do qualitative research. And mixed methods research was not in vogue. There were quite a few scholars that did not see the value of doing mixed methods research. So for APA to kind of place an endorsement on mixed methods research by establishing JARS for mixed methods shows that there is value in how Qual plus Quant can provide that deeper understanding. We can take the quantitative work with the reflective and reflexive descriptors that you get from qualitative research, and it leads us to hopefully a deeper understanding, a more comprehensive understanding of research. So this is a short video that gives an overview, and I want to play this. Let's go with it.
Scientific advancement depends on clear communication. As research grows more complex, the need to report findings in a way that can be easily understood by many has become paramount. Since 1929, the American Psychological Association has published guidelines to improve the quality of scientific writing. However, the field of psychology has grown significantly in recent years, and with it has come a need for research reporting standards that can be applied to a wide range of studies. The APA has now created two comprehensive resources, collectively called APA-style Journal Article Reporting Standards, or APA-style JARS, to help authors report their research with clarity, thoroughness, and transparency. The revised and updated standards expand the scope and depth of the original JARS published in American Psychologist in 2008. These standards are a tool for editors and reviewers to recommend to authors whose work requires additional explanation, as well as a tool for authors determining what is essential to report in scholarly research. APA-style JARS serves as a resource for editors to communicate ways reviewers and authors can improve the quality of research in their journals and facilitate the peer review process. An important update to APA-style JARS is the establishment of reporting standards for qualitative research, qualitative meta-analysis, and mixed methods research. Despite the recent surge in published research rooted in qualitative methods, rigorous standards for reporting such studies have been lacking in psychology until now. To address this, The APA Publication and Communications Board commissioned a task force to examine the numerous inquiry traditions, methods, and goals of the field. The result is a framework describing the materials that should be included in qualitative research reports with guidance for its application. This guidance can assist authors, reviewers, or editors who are less familiar with the distinctive practices used reporting qualitative research studies. The APA has also revised and expanded their quantitative reporting standards. One goal of the updates is to help authors present their work in a way that allows readers to understand the studies being reported at a sufficient level of detail to accurately interpret the results and, where desired, to plan and conduct a replication of the study. To improve the tracking of a priori and post hoc findings, it's now recommended that hypotheses, analyses, and conclusions be divided into primary, secondary, and exploratory groupings. New modules for reporting specific types of studies, such as clinical trials and observational studies, have also been established. Papers that adhere to these standards will provide the information needed for a researcher to replicate a reported study. A major aim of both the quantitative and qualitative versions of APA-style JARs is to broaden the reach of published research from the level of the student to that of the peer reviewer. The standards provide guidance for the editor or reviewer to provide an appropriate evaluation, and for any reader, such as a student, policymaker, or member of the public, to better understand the story. By cultivating common terminology and facilitating comparisons, evaluations, and applications of research, the updated APA-style JARs aim to build a shared language that promotes easier comprehension of research, improves the quality of published work, and advances the field of psychology to benefit society and improve people's lives.
So in short, JARS is supposed to provide the framework so that we understand how research is being done, how it's being reported, how it's being disseminated amongst the scholarly and practitioner community, and then makes it easier for us to understand and then replicate and build upon the existing body of research. Now, let's see how it can be done. So if you've met with me before and you've been in one of my instruction sessions, I talk about how important a good abstract is, not only for our understanding of research and for us to be able to quickly figure out whether it's something we want to spend more time reading. A good abstract helps us locate research. And so there are some standards that we need to understand for how to write and a good abstract and what a good abstract is supposed to have. And in addition, we're also going to talk about some introduction standards that were also included in the JARS chapter. So I'm specifically pulling this information from sections 3.3 and 3.4. The page numbers that I have indicated on this slide are the ones that are from my publication manual, which is the spiral version. So a good abstract is supposed to be accurate, non-evaluative, coherent, readable, and concise. And to build upon that, when we're talking about accuracy, the publication manual says that the abstract should correctly reflect the purpose and content of the paper. Here's what it's not supposed to have. You should not include information that does not appear in the content of the paper. So the abstract is supposed to accurately reflect what's in your paper. If the study builds upon or replicates the work of someone else, the abstract should cite the relevant work with an author date citation. So that should be included in the abstract. If you are building upon or extending on someone else's work, then you should cite them in the abstract. Okay, So the non-evaluative. The abstract is meant to report what's in the body of work. It is not a place to analyze or extend what's happening in your paper. The abstract should be coherent and readable. So the language should be clear, and it says it should be deliberate. Use verbs rather than their noun equivalents. And there's a preference for the active voice versus the passive voice. So for example, using the word investigated, we investigated X claim versus this is an investigation of X claim. Conciseness, okay? Abstracts should definitely be concise. They should be brief. People will often ask if there is a specific word length. There are recommendations for how long an abstract could be. There are some APA guides like this abstract and keyword guide here that I'm going to bring up, recommends that abstracts are limited to about 250 words. This is not the case for every single reporting of research, but this is a guideline for how long an abstract can be. Okay, remember, we're going for conciseness. We are going for comprehensiveness of your report, but everything is not supposed to be in the abstract. Abstract should give you a good understanding of what's in the body of the paper, but it's not supposed to explain everything that's in the paper. And there are some considerations based on the type of work you're trying to do. So for empirical articles, and again, this is coming from the APA manual, you want to consider the problem or the issue that you are investigating in one sentence, if possible, and when you're talking about quantitative analysis, you should include the main hypotheses, the questions, or the theories under investigation. You should talk about who your participants or your data sources are, and the essential features of the research method, including if it's a specific research design, i.e. experimental, if it's qualitative or it's mixed methods, your analytic strategy. So if it's an ethnography, you should say that in the abstract. Your data gathering procedures, your sample size, or a description of the volume of observations or the number of participants. This is particularly of relevance when you're talking about a qual study. If it's a small case study, you want to say, this is what it is. And basic findings. Okay, so give us that good umbrella. Okay. Conclusions or implications or applications of the research. For replication studies, the type of replication, remember, you need to cite that original study that you're replicating. The scope of the replication, the original study that's being done, and then general conclusions that have been made in the replication. Some others for quant or qualitative meta-analysis, it should include research question or research problem, questions, or hypotheses. The characteristics for the inclusion of studies. So when you're doing a meta-analysis, you need to have reasons and justifications for why you included particular resources in the evaluation of the study, or why you excluded certain resources from the evaluation of the study. That should be very explicit and clear in a meta-analysis. Methods of synthesis, main results, conclusions, and implications for theory, policy, or practice. Lit review articles. Okay, so these are publishable or published lit reviews, which we all love to find because they can help really inform the work that we're trying to do. So the abstract for a lit review article, which is also called a narrative literature review, should describe the scope of the literature that is examined in the review, the number of items included in the review, the period of time that is covered by the review, and the general conclusions. And then there's some considerations for theoretical articles, so how the theory works or how the model works, and how the model accounts for and links to empirical results. And then finally, for methodological articles, it should describe general class, essential features, range of applications, and essential features of the approaches being reported. The introduction, this is also this, typically people read the abstract, and then if it's a good abstract, they'll read the introduction. These are two really important parts of a scholarly paper. So the introduction, like the abstract, should be succinct. You should see the historical context, framing of the issue or problem. So the scope, the context, and the theoretical or practical implications of the work. And then the study goals or aims should be articulated within the introduction. And for a sample here, I want to bring up actually the report from the task force on the JARS qual and mixed methods research. So the abstract here, and I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. So remember what a good abstract should be: accurate, non-evaluative, coherent, readable, and concise. So this abstract tells us what's happening, what the charge was here in one sentence, okay? What the standard should do, how it impacts the field, what the, who made up the working group or the task force is here, and then how the standards can be used. Bing, bang, boom. Abstract done. Very clear. And then from the abstract, you should be able to draw keywords that are important. And these are the keywords that people are going to be looking for when they're looking for your work. So the keywords should be reflective, and there should be, at least 3. You don't want to get too keyword happy, but you do want to select important key terms that are relevant to the work that you do and that appear in the abstract. So the introduction here, to remind you, we want a very succinct or concise description of the reported issues that should frame the issue or the problem and address the scope, the context, or theoretical or practical implications, and should articulate the study goals. That's what the introduction should do. So let's look at this introduction. And as we see, we start off with the history. We have the history of the issue, where it fell short. In this case, APA style has not included reporting standards for qualitative research, and thus this addresses the standards for qualitative research. It gives us more information about the working group, how it was formed, what they're supposed to do, how they did it, and what the implications are for this work. Okay. And it ends with that. So this example follows what a good abstract should do and what a good introduction should have. And that's a good model to follow for general research. I've linked here the standards, so the updated standards for quantitative research and the standards you just saw for qualitative and mixed methods. research. And yes, I will provide these links and the PDF for you, okay? So let's talk a little bit in more detail about the quant, qual, and the mixed method standards. And APA has developed some visuals that help you map out like how your decision flow chart should go. So this chart helps with choosing the appropriate JARS quant table depending on your research design. And the link that I will share with you, these are all linked. Okay, so for all studies, you would follow table 1, which I'll show you in a little bit. And if your study involved experimental manipulation, you have a flow chart for how that's going to go. If it did not involve experimental manipulation, there's a flow chart and table that you should follow. And if your study was conducted on one person, a single individual, then there's a table for you to follow. However, if your study involved experimental manipulation, then you move on to step 3, where you have another decision to make. Now, if your study used random assignment to place the participants, you have a table plus a module to follow. But if you did not use random assignment to place your participants in the conditions, then you would follow table 2, module B. Or if your study qualifies as a clinical trial, you would follow table 2, module C. These tables are also included in the chapter 3 for JARS. So there's more information about these tables. Okay. Now, if your study collected data or data, depending on how you say that, where you're from, on more than one occasion, you would follow table 4. Or if your study was intended to be a replication of an earlier study or extension, then you would follow table 6. Now, this is a participant decision flow chart for the stages of an experiment or quasi-experiment or quant study. You have conditions for eligibility here and enrollment to the points of exclusion because, and these are terms you can use in your paper. Excluded because did not meet such inclusion criteria or refused to participate or other reasons. However, if they have met the enrollment criteria, now your assignment, you could assign an individual to the experimental group, which then you would follow through this flow chart for the manipulation or not, the follow-up and the analysis or exclusion from analysis, and then how to give those reasons. On the other side, if they were assigned to the comparison group, the same kind of thought process follows. Whether they received the comparison manipulation or did not, the reasons for that, follow-up, reasons for follow-up, participation or discontinued participation, reasons for that, and then analysis or exclusion from analysis. I'm going to bring up the quant standards here. And in chapter 3, you're going to see a chart that gives you more information about the quantitative process and what you should include. And we're talking about table 3.1 in section 3.5. So the basic expectations for quantitative research. And it lists everything from the title and what the title should do, i.e. the title should identify the main variables and the theoretical issues under investigation and the relationships between them. The title should also identify the population studied. It tells you what the author's note should denote, what the abstract should have, including the objectives, the participants, the study method, the findings, and the conclusion. Introduction, which should include the problem, the lit review, the hypothesis, the aims, and the objectives. The methods, which includes a lot of things, and I'm going to roll them off here. Inclusion and exclusion. Participant characteristics, remember we just talked about that. The sampling procedures, sample size, power, precision, measures, covariates, data collection, quality of measurements, instrumentation, masking, metrics, conditions and design, data diagnostics, and analytic strategy. Your results should include the participant flow. We just talked about that. The recruitment, statistics and data analysis, your discussion. And some people don't always get the difference between results and discussion. And the discussion should include the support of the original hypothesis, the similarity of the results, interpretation, generalizations, and implications. All of this detail is within the publication manual. And it breaks it down point by point what it should all have. So quickly about qual, I'm going to bring up the table here. So the quant table looks very similar. That has the breakdown of what should be under the title. So identification of the key issues, author's note, abstract, and you're going to see some overlap in some of the sections about statement of the problem, the study design, the keywords. Here, it recommends 5 keywords. Introduction. And if you are an author or reviewer, you're going to notice that within the JARS tables here, it gives you guidance for the authors. So what you are expected to provide in terms of information as an author. And for the reviewers, if you review manuscripts for publication, then what you should be looking for as a reviewer. This is really helpful so that we understand what the expectations are of our research. And it makes it very clear across the board what people are looking for. And depending on your role, what you should be looking for. And it continues on and on. There's like 4 pages here of content. One question that I've received is that, do we need to have absolutely every single thing? If it is not applicable to your study, or for some reason you have excluded something that JARS has considered essential, then you need to have a justification for that. And you also need to think through as an author, whether your justification is logical and makes sense. Because maybe you've missed something. And so if you have included that justification within your paper, the reviewer already has your answer. And it's not something that you have to come back to necessarily. For mixed methods design here, there's a very similar table. This one's a little bit shorter because it combines elements of qual and quant standards. So you would have to look at both, make sure that you are meeting the aims of your qual section and you're meeting the aims of your quant section. Of note here, guidance for authors. Pay attention to this one. Refrain from using words that are either qualitative or quantitative because mixed methods is in that middle ground. So qualitative words like explore or understand, quantitative words like determinants, correlates, you would want to use a mix of words. The abstract, again, is telling you the abstract, we know what a good abstract should look like and what it should include, and it should follow those standards. But you need to specify the type of mixed methods design used and consider using a keyword that identifies that this is a mixed methods work, and one that describes the problem addressed and your approaches to inquiry. Is this qual, like big qual and little quant, or is it big quant, little qual? Which one is emphasized more? Your paper should very clearly tell us if this is a balance, or if one particular type of methodology informs more of the work than another. Okay, and there is more guidance here. Okay, let me pull up the APA site here. APA JARS has a really robust set of web pages on the APA style site. And I would encourage you to look at these pages in addition to reading the chapter 3 from the publication manual, because this is what's going to guide your work. A lot of the content that I use today in this presentation comes from the JARS resources because they are really good. And there have been updates since even the publication manual came out. So keep this, as a bookmark on or reference somewhere so that you can go back to it and make sure that you are adhering to the standards that are the latest and have been endorsed by APA style. Okay. And let me pull up that the quant table. There we go. So this is the quant table. Again, what the title should have. Notice that population studied is emphasized in the quant. You have your abstract, introduction, methods, all the things under methods, which is a lot, the results, and discussion.